ask you a few questions.
Sure.
In relation mostly to creative arts, because
Yep.
that's the class that we're in right now. And we did an assignment this year, and our professor asked us what some of our earliest memories were about being creative. So I was just kind of wondering what some of your memories are about being creative as a young person.
I guess you could call it a kind of simple theory of this business of children in the creative thing. As a kid, I was, for instance, I can remember, for instance, I was born in Toronto and spent early years there. I can remember when I was about 5. My father was a steel worker, Scotch immigrant, and we were sitting in front of our tiny house in Toronto, in which I'd been born, on a steep lawn that went down the street. And a policeman went by. At that time they wore helmets like the London police. And my father said to the policeman that I, his bright kid, could identify any car that went by. And I could, in fact. And so, you know, you wouldn't think this is creative, but of course it is visual. And so, and I remember when I went into the Army, they then had a, I suppose, a fairly primitive psychological test that everyone took. It was called an M test. And everybody took it. And the results of my M test indicated that I had extremely high mechanical aptitude. So, it's not what you'd expect, you know. It's, I'll tell you in a nutshell, I think my theory about a young kid, you know, the early years of a young kid, is that I think all young children are creative until roughly the age of puberty, you know.
What do you think changes?
Well, I don't know. I suppose it's probably largely sex, really, you know, the sexual awakening and so on. But there must be other things that go along with that. That is the most evident sort of change. And I'm inclined to think that until that age is reached, all kids are sort of creative in various ways. Some like to sing, we had a son, I mean, we still have him, but he was a child, who loved to sing and sang really like a bird. And at a certain point in school, actually just this age, he said, Charles Colville will not sing. That's the end. It's all over, you know.
He's just embarrassed at a certain
I don't
point,
know what it is, but that was the natural period, you see. Then once this age is reached, there's something different happens, I think. But you see, I do think that until that age is reached, and I suppose it varies some with different children, you know, when they reach this kind of early maturation. Until that, I think kids just are naturally kind of uninhibited and creative. After that age is reached, I think children actually, what they want, if they're showing real, it's not just a question of talent, but a real kind of drive, you know. They actually will spend a lot of time at it. That's the basic indication.
Something that they like to do.
Yeah, they like to do it. They find it absorbing. Once they reach that stage, they need real sort of instruction, you know. And I think you have to kind of separate the two, the natural kind of childish creativity that goes on from the person who is turning to a professional dancer or whatever, you know.
That has a special talent for
Yeah,
a certain thing.
yeah.
Did that sort of happen for you? Was there a teacher that you had in
Yes,
your
yes,
years
there
that
was,
sort of
just,
guided
and I
you?
think things like this tend, I guess my own theory is that you have to sort of let nature take its course, you know, that in my case, when I was in grade 9, I would have been more or less 16. Amherst, I went right from grade 3 through 11 in Amherst. An ordinary, actually quite a good high school. I had very good teachers, you know, all through school in general. I remember them all, every teacher that I had, you know, from grade 1 on through. Yeah, in grade 9, my homeroom teacher, I guess, told me that Mount Allison University nearby were going to run a sort of art school, drawing and painting for kids who might be interested, and it would be taught by an older woman. And the professor of fine arts at Mount Allison would once or twice a year come and look at what the kids did. So I enrolled in this class, which met, I think, one late afternoon a week in what was then the new post office, a kind of room upstairs. And this quite elderly woman who had belonged to an early generation, I'm trying to think of when she might have been born in the 1880s, educated in Switzerland and so on. You know, kind of unusual person in a way. She taught both crafts like metalworking and wood carving and drawing and painting, the whole thing. And she was quite a good teacher, really. So, and I had already started to draw a lot. I drew cars, ships, airplanes, and things like that, you know. Childish, in a way, stuff. But I actually drew, and I started painting still lifes, you know, lemon, apple, and bottle, and so on. And the professor, who later became my teacher for 4 years, when he saw my work, he thought it was really good. And
what was his name?
his name was Royle, R-O-Y-L-E. He was from Sheffield, from the north of England. Very nice man. Actually, another thing that, you know, the older I get, the more I realize, I was trying to describe him to someone, and in the end I said, you know, he was a very good man. And I think when you're talking about teachers, what you need is good people. Now, they may be eccentric, so on, but you have to have people who are inherently good, you know. A bad teacher, I think, can do terrible damage. Some kind of nut, you know, some kind of person with some twisted disposition or something. I guess people, what you require in a teacher is that they realize that a child may be good in some unexpected way, and that there shouldn't be kind of stereotype patterns for what children do. I have sometimes, I've been, you know, interviewed by people because I'm an artist and so on, and I've sometimes said that one of the remarkable things about my childhood, when, for instance, Mr. Royle told me at the end of grade 11, at that time you could go to university after 11 years, I had been offered a scholarship to Dalhousie, and so I had, it was a $200 scholarship, which at that time would be like $2,000 now, you know, or maybe more. And I had thought of studying law because I had become extremely interested in free trade. This is way before, you know, the current.
Mulrooney year,
Yes, yeah.
82.
Yeah, this is, I'm talking about 1936
Huh.
and stuff.
Is that right?
Wow.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat.
So I spoke to the Rotary Club on free trade. I was invited to speak to the Rotary Club in Moncton on free trade, and I did that. So someone came, a lawyer came up to me and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You'll make a great liberal, my boy." At that time, the liberals were free trade and conservatives were for tariffs. Later, of course, in the Mulrooney years,
Yes,
it was the other way
switched it.
around.
Yeah. And that's something.
But
know that.
anyway,
No.
you see, so and I thought, well,
Neat.
if this kind of stuff interests me, I can talk to people and so on, I'll go to Dalhousie and study law. So I thought probably, and I also thought actually of going to Royal Military College, because I knew two guys who had done that older than I. This was before the Second War. But then this Mr. Royal talked with me in the spring of my grade 11 year. And he said, you know, I think you will have very distinct promise and so on. You should think of becoming an artist. And I've joked about this to people, but it's serious. I said to him, if I become an artist, will I be poor? You know, and if he had said yes, I would say, okay, I don't want that. You know, I don't want to be poor. I don't want to suffer. Like that. And he said, well, he said, I am not poor. He said, I remember that, in fact, at some point he told me his salary, which was $3,000 a year. He was a professor and head of a department. This is the late 30s. But $3,000 was okay at that time. You know? He didn't have expensive tastes.
Yeah.
So he said, well, if it means that, I'm okay, I'm an artist. So I thought, okay, that's it, that's what I'll do. Now, the interesting thing is that neither my mother or father had been in school, I think, beyond grade 6. My mother's mother died when she was 14. She went to work at the age of 14 as a milliner making hats. And my father had grown up in Scotland in a little kind of modest farm that had something like grade 6. Had some training as a surveyor in coal mines without any formal education, and was essentially, you know, at that time a blue collar worker. Both my mother and father, when I said I had decided I was going to be an artist, they said, great, that's fine.
Do you think that was sort of unique for that time?
Well, I'll tell you,
Most people said that?
and this is, you know, kind of germane to the whole idea. If my father had been a doctor or a bank manager or some sort of big shot, he would have said, an artist, are you crazy, you know? So, often, parents have stereotyped ideas of what's good and what's bad, you know. My mother, you could almost say, adored her father, who was a tailor and also Scotch, had come here as a very young man. And I picked this up, a child picks up the way a dog picks up who my dog knows what persons are particularly like and so on, you know. Children do the same sort of thing. And I always admired him. And of course only when my mother had died and her younger sister, youngest, when the children was dying. And she said to me, she said, you know, Alec, Dad couldn't read or write. He had run a business, quite a prosperous business in Trenton, Ontario, quite a big brick house. And I suppose he could write checks and sign his name and do anything you had to do. But, you know, he was strict, really illiterate.
Is he the one that introduced you to museums and
Yes,
things like that?
yeah. He lived, at this time he had moved to Toronto, And I remember walking down Avenue Road to the Royal Ontario Museum, my first visit to a museum. He being a tailor, of course, wearing three-piece suit, Humber hat, polished shoes, everything, all of which I admire.
I just have a few questions about your own creative process and sort of what your theory is of creativity. I think we sort of have talked about that before, but do you think about your ideas that you let incubate for a long time, or how does that work? When do you reflect on your work, or once you finish a piece, you just sort
Well,
of...
actually, once I've finished it, I'm always anxious to get it out of the house and away, so I can stop thinking about it in a way, because it's over and I have to move on. I think it's a trite thing to say, but of course art always emerges out of the unconscious. Well, you don't know why you're doing this, or why, at a given time I'm doing, let's say, this thing, which is of a woman playing a kind of banjo-like thing. It's based partly, it's titled Fête Champêtre, which means, of course, party in the country, in the field, There's a famous painting by Giorgione, a 16th century Venetian painter called Fête Champêtre, which I've always admired, and in it a nude woman is playing an instrument and people are sort of flying around on the grass and I think being set open country, so it's nice.
Relaxing.
Yeah. And so I mention this because art, a person who is a poet has read a lot of poetry. I have looked at an awful lot of paintings in Berlin and London and New York, and Brussels and Boston and so on. And to some extent, art is built on other art, I think to a far greater extent than most people realize. Medicine is built on other medical people. What is it, you stand on the shoulders of, what is that expression?
Building blocks.
And so on. So like there's, but you see some kind of, at the time I'm thinking of doing this, I'm thinking of, I'm thinking of the idea of basically the man is supine and the woman is an artist, you might say. And they're in the country, and it's contemporary because it's a four-wheel drive vehicle, you can tell from the wheel and so on. So it's, it's the modern version of Giorgione's Fête Champêtre, in a way.
So it's kind of a building upon another person's work?
Yes, that's right, yeah. So that people borrow. The arts are very much, that way.
I never really thought of it that way before.
Yeah.
Kind of neat.
And this isn't a sign of lack of originality.
No.
Originality is something that people who are actually in the arts don't even think about, I used to say to students, fine art students, there's no one else in the world like you. You, a particular person.
That's right.
Absolutely unique. Not only the DNA and everything, but there's nobody who will respond to experience exactly the way you do. So you don't need to worry about being original.
Yeah.
You can't help being original.
Yeah.
Forget that. So because you're unique, you can borrow stuff.
Neat
That
idea.
is. That's a neat philosophy.
Yeah.
Do you throw out much of your work, or do you
No, I
change
don't. No,
anything?
I don't.
Once you begin a piece,
Once
you
I
always
begin,
see it
I
through.
usually, almost always, I work away at it often for months. Usually for months, in fact, until it's finished, and then that's it. And then I have what is always in a sense, as other artists have tell you the same thing. The difficult time is when you're in that kind of no man's land in between. One thing is over and you don't know what you're going to do next.
Mm.
And you never know, actually, that you will be able to do another thing, in a certain sense.
Are you kind of worried sometimes?
Yeah, I think it doesn't happen with me, thank God, so far. But, you never know what it might happen.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of your biggest challenges when it comes to an artistic process?
Well, I guess I don't think of it much in terms of challenge. One has, at the beginning, one has this somewhat undefined idea for something, for new work. And I always quote the Russian writer. Anyway, he said, when I begin a work, I have only the shadow of an object which is not yet present. I think this is a very interesting idea of the incomplete, as yet not anything like fully realized form in which things start, So then one sort of works away at it, and somehow it becomes more concrete and so on, and finally it's done, it has become, you might say, absolutely concrete. So what was just a shadow of an object not yet present, the actual thing is there, and at the end, when at the end of the Second War, when I was warned during the war, I was almost always in so-called theaters of war, so I was alone with one. I served for a long time at the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division. I was the only artist in a place of 15,000 men. So, but then when the war was over, there were perhaps a dozen army, or no, 10 or so. And we were for a while working in London and then in Ottawa together in sort of adjacent rooms. And I realized I didn't like this. I thought one of the things when I get out of the army, I don't want to be where there are other artists. And I've always joked about the famous Greta Garbo statement. Greta Garbo said, "I want to be alone." She was this mysterious female figure who liked being alone. Different people vary. Some people find stimulation from other arts, and others don't.
So you thought you might have been influenced maybe by them? Or?
Well, I just found it sort of boring. I wasn't much interested in what other people were doing. And I didn't enjoy having them come into my little work room to see what I was doing. I thought,
it's private.
I can do without this. Someone who's an art historian at U of T, maybe, and so on, form a committee, and they are asked to suggest how could a set of coins commemorating the 100th anniversary be, how could they pick someone to do it, and how would it be? And they picked a number of people, including me, and I was asked to submit designs. So I thought about it for a while. And the first thing I decided, to come and meet these people.
It's just a minute, this is it.
Oh, okay. Where was it?
How you were selected to
Oh,
do
yes,
the
yes, yes.
centennial coins.
Yeah, so I was asked to submit designs. This included 1 cent, 5 cent, 10 cent, 25 cent, 50 cent, and $1 coin. The $20 gold piece was not part of this. It was just a sort of commoner thing. And I thought, well, what about this? And I thought, are there great, if I'd been in America, of course I would think Roosevelt was on the dime, you know, the guy who founded the University of Virginia, and was also president, John Adams, and Abraham Lincoln. I couldn't think of any Canadian in myself, anything like that.
Right, not the same
No,
significance.
just, I couldn't think of anything. So I thought, well, what do I admire? And I thought animals. I like all the animals. So I decided I'm going to do animals. So I made the design for each coin. And
How did you choose the animal that you did?
well, I wanted to pick common animals. For instance, the 1 cent piece has an ordinary pigeon, you know, the kind of thing you'd see in Toronto or Spring Hill Junction or anything.
All throughout, really?
Yeah, and rabbits and these ordinary things. Wolf, mackerel, fish, rhododendron, and so on, and the big goose on the $1. So I made the drawings, the designs, and some of them I surprised they picked them as the. So I spent about almost a year on this. I made the actual models in 3 dimensions. And,
Like a sculpture, almost?
yeah, it's so-called relief sculpture, you see, and you do it oversized, and then it's, now it would be done by a computerized thing, but then it was done by an extraordinary machine invented in France. I think it probably made in France, in the mint. But this is a machine, how would I describe it? You have an 8-inch disc, which is a relief sculpture. It's in 3 dimensions, very shallow, of course. And that is put on a rotating spindle and connected to it by mechanical arms and gears and so on. There's a feeler starts at that touches the center of this disc. And there's another feeler that touches the center of a steel core, which is, for instance, the size of a dime. This is 8 inches and the dime is, of course, small. Now, the feeler on the cast thing transmits its message scaled down to the cutting thing, and as the 2 things turn, this machine makes a reduced image from the plaster model. And then that image is the punch, which makes the die, which actually makes the coins, you see, by stamping.
Have you seen that process take place?
Yes, yeah, I actually worked in the mint part of the time, you know. So I did all that. I did the actual models, and so the coins are exactly the way I made them.
Something. So the first one reads the outline and then sends the message to the next.
That's right. Yeah.
It's
Now
almost
it
like
would be
how a
done
key
by a
is cut.
computer, but
Yeah.
then it was done by mechanical means,
Pretty neat.
3-dimensional mechanical cutting process.
That is very,
Something.
yeah.
I remember I was told that I could have my initials on the coin, and very small, and I decided I didn't want to do that. I didn't like the idea.
A
But
lot
I've
of
never
people don't
since,
realize that.
I've never since signed my painting.
Is that right?
I thought in the Middle Ages, I signed these for prints, so they are signed, which is a kind of guarantee of authenticity. But I thought in the Middle Ages, no one signed a painting because the ego of the artist wasn't supposed to be. You know, the Virgin Mary is what it's all about. The ego of the artist is nothing.
So there's paintings of yours out there that aren't signed by you?
No, they're signed and written on the back and so on, but they're not signed on the
front.
face, yeah.
Are your paintings considered realism? Is that?
Yes, I think that's the simplest way to discuss them, you know.
Thank you.
When this business. Hi, how are you? How's your neck thing that you were worried about? I had checked out, and